when we look at the expenditures, it also includes the expenditures that are imputed on things which have been grown on their own plot of land. Even then, if we look at all the people across rural and urban, about 77% is currently under this more meaningful poverty line. Now, if you look at the actual number of poor using this measure, actually it has increased during this period when India has been growing at a very fast pace. So the number of poor increased from 811 million to 836 million between 93 and 94. So this is a very nice way to understand that what I was talking about, this whole growth process has really bypassed most of the people. So if we have any meaningful measures of income poverty, we can see that the proportion has not declined, and since population is growing, the absolute numbers have actually increased. Now we can supplement that by looking at several non-income measures of poverty. Here I will just point to one thing, which is the proportion of children who are suffering from undernutrition. So this is a commonly used measure, proportion of children with low weight for age. India has about 47% children currently who have undernutrition. Now what is striking is to compare it with other countries there. Lot of those countries are sub-Saharan African countries who have per capita income compared to India far lower. Even 1/4 or even 1/5 of that, they have similar kinds of measures. So in India, during this period when this huge growth is taking place, these kinds of measures are not improving. Now, that is one of the striking features of this growth regime. And then there are these two other things. Inequality is increasing, and it has come on top of inequality has come this huge state-assisted resource grab. So if we want to look at inequality, compare the fact that about 77% of the population in 2004 spent less than 20 rupees a day for all kinds of expenditures. Compare that to the fact that in India there was about 27 billionaires in 2007, which increased to 52 in 2009. The richest person has a net worth of 32 billion. The 100 richest Indians have a net worth of 276 billion. There are other measures to point out to this growing inequality. I have not brought this up here. Let me just briefly then talk about the other thing which is the characteristic of this current growth regime, is this huge increase in the state-backed resource grab process. So lot of foreign and domestic capitalists want to get into mining, build power stations, get into retail. Now we will see in a minute, and I'll show you a map, that there is a huge stretch right in the heart of India, which is very mineral rich and where a lot of these economically vulnerable people live. A lot of the Adivasi population live. Now, if the domestic capital and foreign capital has to incorporate those resources into the profit-making motive, into the profit-making enterprises, these people have to be removed from that place. That is basically one of the reasons why people all across this region have emerged into strong resistance movements. They are using different kinds of methods, but they are all protesting against this forcible land grab. And basically the state is not listening to their demands. What is instead coming is this huge police force and state repression. So let me show you this map, which is really striking. So this is a map which I have taken from a security analysis website called South Asia Terrorism Portal. This map shows the growth of the Maoist movement in India, and you can see that basically this region is where the Maoist movement is strong and has been growing. There are two things that I would like to point out. One, this map is a monthly per capita expenditure across states. The pink states are the states where the average monthly per capita expenditure is less than 450 rupees in rural areas. It is obvious that there is a huge overlap between this and this. That is the first thing. The second thing is that if you want to see the mineral wealth of India, there is a huge belt exactly here where a lot of these minerals are lying. So bauxite, iron ore and other minerals which the state wants to take and let the private capital use for profit making. This is precisely that region. So there is a nice overlap between regions of high mineral wealth, regions of economic vulnerability, and this region of huge growth of the movement. So there must be some kind of link between the two, and that is what we want to understand. Now there is one small argument that I would like to make and end there and let Gautam then speak about the movement, which is the argument many people make that, okay, in the initial phases of the growth, inequality is increasing, but if this growth process goes on for a long time, these people will benefit, there will be trickle down, and everything will be hunky-dory. Now, I would suggest that that is not what the evidence points to. Why? To understand that, we must understand the political economy of this whole growth process. Now, as I said, most of the people are in agriculture. And let me show you that there is huge landlessness in agriculture. So the proportion of households who are effectively landless, meaning who have less than 2.5 acres of land, has been growing and is currently about 60%. If on top of that you add people who have less than 5 acres, that would be more than 80%. So more than, sorry, I was wrong. So this is 1 acre and 80% is 2.5 acres. So 80% of households have less than 2.5 acres. These are very small plots of land. Now, those plots of land do not give enough income to support a decent standard of living. So therefore, they are forced to find employment outside agriculture. What do they find? They find employment in the informal non-agrarian sector. This is marked by low wages, highly insecure job scenario. So therefore, they keep holding on to the small plots of land that they have. Therefore, when those small plots of land are not sold by them, there is no way in which land gets aggregated in agriculture. Plots don't become larger, technological change does not happen. Therefore, agricultural productivity and income stagnates. So there is a dynamic between agrarian stagnation and the informal sector, which I will call the dynamics of stagnation and exclusion. So most people are caught in low productivity, low income wages, in low income work, and therefore this whole growth process is basically bypassing them. Now, unless this is broken in some way, the current growth scenario is not going to help most of the people. And the policies that are being promoted by the state in no way tries to break this. That is why I think that there is no reason why we should believe in the trickle-down theory. It is just not happening. That is not what the evidence is. What is going on is that huge growth is taking place, but it is bypassing most of the people. Most of the people are caught in poverty, and on top of that, the state is coming in and taking away whatever access to common property and other resources that they had. That is leading to resistance, and instead of addressing the genuine grievances of the people, the state is coming in with more repression. That is basically the context, I think, in which we can understand the war that is going on in India today. So I would like Gautam to talk about that.
Thank you, Dipankar, for providing the overall context. But let me begin by pointing out, first thing that you have to keep in mind is that there is not that Indian army has been the busiest peacetime army in the world fighting its own people, continuously from 1970 onwards, without any break. And India has this unprecedented record, if one wants to look very closely and with some degree of seriousness, that since the transfer of power in 1947, there has not been a single year when the Indian state has not been war against its own people in some part of the country or the other. Starting from Telangana uprising in 1946 to 52, to the Naga people, followed by Kashmir in the last 20 years, Manipur, you name it. And in 2005, a new war opened up, a new front opened up in central India. Now it's very important to keep in mind that until 2009, there was no Indian intelligentsia, India's left and democratic forces, barring some groups, remained completely silent and acquiesced in this war against their own people, which was being fought. So for 20 years, when Kashmiris were being battered black and blue, and unprecedented atrocities were being committed on them, India's democratic and left intelligentsia remained silent. That is something that we have to keep in mind. And it's only in 2009, for the first time, when the war moved from the border area, the rimland, in Kashmir, in the Northeast, to central Indian provinces, the 7 central Indian provinces of India, that for the first time, India's intelligentsia have woken up to a war that is taking place in their own backyard. And they are getting affected by it for the first time. So the first time you see anti-war sentiments rise in India beginning 2009. Even in 2005, when the campaign against Salva Judum began, it remained sporadic. It took a number of years before actually the implication of what was going on sank in, and democratic conscience started speaking out. But it's only in 2009 for the first time that you see an anti-war sentiment emerge in the shape of anti-Operation Green Hunt. And across India, you have various coalitions that have been formed against this Operation Green Hunt. In order to understand what is going on, at times the plight of an individual helps us shed light on a social reality, which otherwise is hidden. This is what has happened in India also. When a remarkable and dedicated doctor like Dr. Binayak Sen was picked up in 2007 and charged with sedition and waging war. And I'll come to that later, because India has this unique record where we have retained laws which the Brits left for us. Even when the Brits have removed it from their statute, we are in so much love with the British Raj that we have retained it. Okay? So waging war and sedition have been two laws that the Indian state has employed against dissidents very effectively. That should be kept in mind. When Dr. Binayak Sen, he was a remarkable doctor who decided, instead of practicing either in some metropolitan town in India or abroad, he decided to in fact devote his life to live and work amongst the poorest of the poor, which happened to be the tribals in central India. And that's where he devoted more than 30 years of his life. Worked with various movements, trade union movements and the tribals, and ran a clinic, and especially worked amongst the tribal children who suffer. In fact, the figures that Dipankar was showing you, if you disaggregate them and you see which sections of the population gets worst affected, then you discover that the tribals, the Dalits and the Muslims are the 3 worst affected, and the size of the proportion of the population, our children, amongst these communities is much higher. I mean, it's close to 50+%. The question that arises is, why did the Indian state go out of its way to charge a person with waging war and of sedition in somebody like Dr. Binayak Sen? In order to understand that, we have to move closer and understand the larger context within which he was working. Dr.